Um, so, at LiveIntent, we brought together the world's best advertising technology to the most powerful marketing channel ever created, which from our perspective is email. So we've created the largest logged in accessible media channel outside of Facebook, Google, and Amazon, and make it possible for both large and small brands to reach 200 million people every month as they consume email. And that's email newsletters, alerts, and announcements. And these emails are actually delivered by some of the best brands and publishers out there in the marketplace. So New York Times, Fanatics, Meredith, Condé Nast, Kraft, General Mills, folks like that. And since every impression is only served to a person once they've opened up an email and turned on images, we can verify that every impression is targeted and optimized and attributed to a real person, not a third-party cookie. So with that said, let's dive into, we got a great question set. I'm really excited. We had a great prep meeting, so I'm looking forward to this conversation, Rico. The first question I have is, you had quite the journey yourself, and from the military, the Navy, Lord and Taylor, Lamborghini, to a awesome women's reproductive health company, SimpleHealth. Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, it was about as wild as a ride in a Lamborghini. I can definitely tell you that. I have a very diverse background. I served 8 years active duty in the United States Navy. And during that time, I had what we would call a non-traditional sailor's experience. So I think when most people think of Navy, they think, oh, going on the ship, going to Singapore, Hawaii, or Hong Kong, or wherever. And I think my experience was completely opposite. So I joined right after 9/11, and all of my time was with the unit called Naval Coastal Warfare, and it's exactly what that is. It was a warfare unit. We were deployed to the Middle East, spent some time in Africa, South America, did some time in Europe as well. So I didn't get any of those Hong Kong, Singapore trips, but I did get to see a lot of the world, and honestly, it's really shaped me to be the marketer I am today, and really understanding people. And I think that's our role as marketers, is to bring our customers to the business and, really bring that customer point of view and the customer's needs to what we're trying to do as a business. So, my transition from the military went to a retailer called the Navy Exchange, which is like a shopping mall on a military base. It's very cool. It's hidden. And they get everything you'd find at a Macy's and a Best Buy and a Target, but all under one roof. Yeah, so you could go to the Navy Exchange and buy your Coach sunglasses, your Kellogg cereal, and your Sony TV all in one Navy Exchange. And then from there, my career just continued to grow and evolve. I have a very curious mindset, so I love to learn. As a marketer, I'm often in meetings with the operations team, with the strategy team, with clinical services in my currently role. And so, I think what's helped me continue to join great brands like Lamborghini. At one point in my career, I was the head of the marketing for Lamborghini North America. I was the head of marketing and CMO for Lord and Taylor, which is, the US's oldest retailer. It's always been that curiosity, and always being able to understand your customer or your patient's needs, and how to just creatively communicate and make it sticky with them. So,
That's great. Yeah. So it sounds like your through line has been curiosity, which is super important, especially in this industry. There's so many headwinds that we hit that are unexpected sometimes. And, you could either be afraid or anxious, or you could just be curious and go figure it out. And it seems like that's been a good through line for you. Speaking of crazy headwinds, we're coming off of one heck of a year, for a lot of brands, whether it's in the, travel, food, beverage, entertainment, sports, a lot of these companies had a plan going into 2020, and they got punched in the face with COVID, and then they had to come up with a new plan. How did the pandemic impact SimpleHealth and you and your team, and how did you react?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's my plug for the brand. At SimpleHealth, we are a reproductive wellness organization, and our brand is focused on providing access for people who have reproductive health needs. So from your birth control, your herpes, cold sore treatment, over-the-counter supplements, urinary tract infections. And that's really our mission, is to make sure that we're really providing that access to people who need the services.
Yeah.
And who, what I would say through this collective displacement of the pandemic, really needed it the most, right? So we think about, what did 2020 do for us? So I joined in Q4 of 2020. So what I can imagine, and through the conversations I've had with other team members, is you're right. The pandemic happened, everybody ripped up their strategies, and we were like, let's just hold on for dear, hold on for dear life. And, you know, what I would say for SimpleHealth is it was such a great moment for the brand, because we obviously saw huge growth as a result of the pandemic, because everybody that was being collectively displaced, like yourself, like me, like my sister, and many of our patients, needed reproductive wellness still. They still needed their birth control. They still needed a doctor to go and tell them, here's what you should be taking, here's what we think you should do, et cetera, et cetera. And so it really propelled our brand to deliver for our patients and deliver for prospective, you know, patients who were interested in telemedicine but hadn't really dipped their toe in it yet. You know, what we see is a couple of emerging trends is, you know, 80% or so of our patients that were first-time telehealth providers or users, excuse me, in 2020 are actually most likely not going to go back to an in-person model in 2021 and beyond. So we see that. You know, there was a McKinsey report recently published. Again, I think it was like 70%. And again, I was just talking about our patients, but 70% of total telehealth adopters have made the statement that they are going to stick with the telehealth service, whether it's mental care, you know, again, reproductive wellness, primary care providers. So I think what we see is it's not going anywhere. Just like the internet, right? We're all waiting for the internet fad to run out, but it's just continuing to evolve. Telehealth is going to be here for a while. And what it's caused us to do is think patient first.
Yeah.
And we have led with empathy. We have simple principles. And the very first simple principle is patient always. And that's above every and anything else. And it's patient first, empathy, teamwork, and then, you know, the business and some other points. And so 2020 really required us and gave us that opportunity to be patient first. You know, before my time, we saw that patients were reaching out to us and saying, I lost my job, unfortunately, I can't afford medication, or I lost my insurance. And we said, not a problem, we're going to take care of you. And we were covering patients' medication, services, treatment through the pandemic. Wow. That needed it. And it, you know, and it wasn't a retention hook. It wasn't anything where we say, okay, we'll cover you for 6 months and then we'll blend out. It was just, you need us, we're going to be here for you, and we're going to take care of you.
I think that's what people do during a war. And I really do think this is like World War III, that this should have always been a war footing. And that's what people do. Companies, individuals, you know, people go out of their way to help people during this time. And so it's great to hear that you did that.
Yeah,
you went from one war footing to another, but you know, like.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting analogy, and I think you're spot on in the sense that we are facing a global war on something that is invisible. You know, what I tell my team and what I tell people when I'm having conversation on the pandemic is we have to act with empathy and patience in 2020 and beyond.
Right.
So, yeah.
Oh, that's smart. Now, the company's only been around for how long now?
We have been around since 2015, but we actually pivoted because in 2015, we launched as Simple Contacts. And the original founders and organization was an organization that was, you know, providing telehealth services for eyewear, prescription contacts, et cetera. And then in 2019, we pivoted to SimpleHealth, and we moved off of the contact lens business and launched our reproductive wellness business. So, you know, 2018, 2019 is really when we started SimpleHealth, the reproductive brand.
Well, I mean, given that it's only been around for a couple of years, and one of those years was the pandemic year, I imagine that forecasting like 3-5 years out is super easy on such an unusual year. Is that correct? Was it just a breeze?
You're absolutely right. You have a marketing team that has flipped everything upside down in 2020. And oh, by the way, we have no historical data because telehealth is a new industry as a whole. What else? We obviously saw a huge acquisition growth in 2020. Now that the cost of inventory is coming back to normalized levels, obviously there's some headwinds there. So yes, in a perfect world, I would say planning was easy, but absolutely opposite of all of that.
And then this year, when you went into planning, did you end up having to replan the year again? I know that you had to replan last year, but how about this year? Did you come in, create one plan, and they're executing no problem, and that's it, or did you have to replan again?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I wish that was the case, but unfortunately that wasn't. And so what we've started to do now is we developed our brand strategy, we developed our campaign strategy, and then we are what I like to call semper gumby, or always flexible, with when it comes to our investments, right? So when it comes to how much are we investing in this channel versus this channel, brand versus performance, PR versus influencers. So we're very flexible in that space because we realize that in 2021, everything is moving very fast, right? And so, year over year numbers are obviously very different. We saw a very healthy Q5 this year, as most brands did in January. But then we're starting to see some of those other channels normalize and even increase. I think I saw Facebook is up 30% over what it was in 2019 or so, or what it was pre-pandemic levels to where we are today. And so, we're doing just the same that everybody else is doing, is we're just consistently being flexible and hearing our patients and hearing the market.
Yeah, we're going to get to that Facebook issue and the idea of like what's happening to pricing and costs and how that affects the business. But you mentioned brand and performance. You have a new brand, a relatively new brand. Telehealth, wouldn't say that's new, but a lot of people are actually kind of new last year to it. So you've got education around brand awareness, you've got performance that you got to drive, and you've got telehealth as somewhat new. But how are you're from a messaging perspective and media buying perspective, how are you balancing brand versus performance marketing?
That's you absolutely hit the nail on the head. There's three components when we're talking about balancing that fine line of being a very high growth direct response company, but also building a brand with what I love to call as our heartbeat and soul, while also educating patients and customers on telehealth. So what we do is, again, going back to the beginning of this conversation, is we make sure that we put our patients at the core of everything we're doing. And so we do talk about that patient who maybe just isn't there yet when it comes to engaging with the telehealth brand. They're very comfortable with going into their doctor. They're very comfortable with their primary care provider. So we really work through on that patient on what are the barriers and pain points for them, and how are we messaging to them that we are able to support and deliver on all those things that he or she may need. And then when it comes to our performance and our growth patients, I think it's a lot of fun there because that's where we get the most room to test and learn with our patients, right? So we're testing messaging, we're testing creative. We understand that our patients respond favorably over creative with an actual real person in it versus a graphic design or creative with with just our medication in it. And then lastly is, the brand component is the space is increasingly becoming more competitive. Yeah. And so, and that's why I talked about at the beginning is patient first is what we lead with. And so what do I mean by that is we have a brand team that is very focused on what are the cultural and global moments throughout the year, throughout the month, throughout the week and day that we can be a part of and we can lean in on. And so our brand has been very focused on making sure that, whether it happens to be in 2020 when, brands were using their voice and their platforms for Black Lives Matter movement, we were able to make sure that we equally were being a part of that. Really talking about the murder of George Floyd. And, we not only talk about that externally, but we also talk about it a lot internally. And, we are really are going through this growing process right now of making sure that everything we're putting out externally reflects who we are internally. And whether that's inclusivity, diversity, equality. So it's definitely been a very fun experience because we don't not necessarily always think about our patients, but we always think about our internal team as well.
Right. No, that's really smart. I feel like the pandemic has made a lot of people more emotionally intelligent, and a lot of companies doing a lot of work to have those discussions internally and externally is important. I think business has a great opportunity to step forward and be a force of good in the world, and so it's nice to see that happening. Switching gears a bit, want to talk about the media landscape and how that's changed over the last year, the headwinds of last year, new headwinds that might be coming up, and the pandemic hit. What happened was what happens in most recessions: brands pull out. Some brands pull out. Media costs go down. CPAs start to go down. Some companies surge forward and do really well. Some companies, don't. How did the pandemic impact your media costs and your acquisition costs?
Yeah, so I would say we are in the group of cohorts that were favorably impacted for our media costs, right? So you have brands in 2020 that were leading really heavy with brand, what we'll call top of the funnel, if you will. My prior life at Lord & Taylor, linear TV, terrestrial radio, out of home, billboards. And then you have brands like ours that really were born out of this performance, really D2C, digital media growth. And so it really helped us through 2020 because we were able to take advantage of really cost-effective and efficient media, whether it was across Facebook or paid search, and OTT even. And we saw that. But what I think we're starting to see is we're starting to see the pendulum come back now because my former life at Lord & Taylor, where we were buying $50 to $100 million of linear TV, I would be scared making those upfront commitments going into 2021, especially not knowing what the macro effects and the trends are going to be like for our population. And so I think what I've seen, what I've heard through conversations with other business leaders, other CMOs, is they're really looking at moving those dollars of investments into digital channels, which is now, I think, driven the cost of digital media up, which has made all of us, again, if we weren't rewriting our strategies in 2020, we're now doing some tweaking and sharpening that pencil in 2021, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, the eMarketer came out with some research over the last couple of weeks that talked about the changing landscape and how budgets have changed and switched over more to digital. Facebook, Google, Amazon, all have reforecasted, and eMarketer is showing billions of dollars more going to those companies. When you think about like a Facebook, if you're adding billions of dollars in ad spend in a market like North America, where they've already, there's not a lot of growth, yet to have in North America. They've been in North America for a really long time. There's only one thing that's going to happen, and that is CPM, CPC is going to go up, CPAs are going to go up, ROAS is going to go down. And so, yeah, I think that a lot of companies who had it really easy last year, DTCs, retail companies, anybody that was home. I mean, the whole theme is about home and companies that were able to cater to people at home, but they're going to be in some trouble this year if they don't diversify. So, what are you doing? What are you doing to mitigate risk this year of your prices going up, and what channels are you thinking about moving into or diversifying into?
Yeah, great question. I think that we are obsessively testing and learning, and especially in the digital landscape. So, I have a really great head of growth. Her name is Monica, and she is continuously seeking out new channels for us to explore and test, whether they're in different channels between display and email or OTT, CTV, et cetera, or within the channel, multiple, different display partners, different, social media. We've now, paid social is not just Facebook anymore. We now have TikTok. We now have, Snapchat was actually working very well for us because they've got great geo targeting capabilities. So I think that we're really just looking for, the channels that we can continue to optimize and learn from. And then I would say the second part of 2021 that we're going to start leaning into is really brand and top of the funnel. And, in a world where big brands are moving away from those traditional top of the funnel channels like linear, like out of home, billboards, kiosks, etc., we are actually going to start building more of a brand to drive that brand awareness and start having some of that share of voice market share come towards SimpleHealth. Because when you build a brand with a sturdy foundation, it actually makes your digital channels more efficient. And these are things and these are things that most, marketers on the calls know. I think the challenge with that project, and you're not alone in this, is how do you measure it at a place that is comfortable for your management team, for your board, because we're a high growth D2C e-com brand. And so for me to go and say I need to invest X amount of dollars in top of the funnel, it's very it's not scary, but it's just in an uncomfortable place. And so we're really working 2021 to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Well, and just because you're branding doesn't mean you can't be performance branding, meaning you're able to link things back to performance in some ways, whether it's an increase in brand awareness, purchase intent, brand favorability, or really moving the needle and helping to drive sales. We will touch on it a little bit, and for many marketers, they haven't really come up with solutions to this next headwind. We believe, at LiveIntent, that the biggest headwind that we're going to face over the next 12 to 18 months is the deprecation of third-party cookie and IDFA, which makes those linkages and trying to figure out what's working in attribution and even doing surveys and brand studies or whatever it is going to be a lot more difficult without third-party cookies. So, you don't have to go deep into this, but just want to get, if you have any thoughts at all on the disappearance or the cookie apocalypse that's coming up.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that's on all of our minds. The unique difference, again, if I look back at my time, Lamborghini, Lord & Taylor, Audi of America, is I'm now in an industry that's very highly regulated, right? So now we have HIPAA compliance. We are very sensitive. If I wasn't even more protective before about PII, even more so now. So, we are working towards, I think, CDP is something that's every CMO's mind right now. And, making sure that you have a fully flushed, holistic view of your current patients and their leads. And then, finding channels that are HIPAA compliant, finding channels that are open to partnering with us, but also following our very strict PII and HIPAA compliance guidelines. And so, we anonymize a lot of our data. We hash a lot of our customer data going back to our partners. If in my previous roles, let's say we gave 100% of our customer data, at Lord & Taylor, Rico bought this shirt, we're going to send all this data back to Facebook so that they can create a lookalike audience. We send back maybe 50% of that, so we're not getting emails, no names, no IP addresses, no date of birth, no age, no nothing. And so it's made it, and I wouldn't say it's a challenge. I would say, honestly, it's made it very interesting and exciting with my performance team, because they are very much a group of curious-minded performance marketers. And so that we're always trying to figure out, if I can't send back this, what other things can I infer from this cohort of patients that I can use, out there within some of our media channels to help be efficient? So it's definitely a ton of fun.
You touched on one of the questions, and I'll start weaving some of these in, here and there, but so what innovations and technologies are you utilizing to execute your strategies? Has that changed since the pandemic began? And I think we can couple that question with, like, you're building a tech stack, and so I think these two questions, like, what might that tech stack look like? What technologies are you using to prepare yourself for this year, but also, next year?
Yeah, I think when I joined, we were using an attribution that I think wasn't giving us the full picture of our patients. And so we've launched an MTA attribution last month. So we're actually about a month and a half ago. So I'm very excited because we finished some learning phase. We've gone through and had a couple of touch points about our customer conversion journeys. So we're really excited for the next phase of understanding our weighted conversion model through MTA. I think that's one thing. And then I think another thing is going out there and pushing partners and understanding that if a partner can't deliver what you need within your tech stack, that it's okay to make sure that you go and find a different partner. It doesn't mean you have to walk away from that partner. It just means you need to find another partner to make sure you fill that tech stack. Because through our MarTech stack, it's, from prospecting, conversion, lead nurturing, conversions, and all the way through to repurchase and re-engagement. And so you should have partners win back, exactly. And you should have partners through all that phase, or all those phases.
Yeah, you brought up a good point, MTA, and as long as I think when people think about these technologies that they don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. One of the issues that MTAs have and continue to have, and I'm not sure of anyone who's actually mitigated, figured out this part, but they are overly dependent on third-party cookies.
Yeah.
I've never seen an MTA system that wasn't, and we've had folks use MTA systems on LiveIntent, but we're in email, we're in a cookieless environment. So we've actually had MTA say, oh, email doesn't work for acquisition. Email doesn't work for your email CRM retargeting. And we're like, are you really, did you just say that email doesn't work for retargeting or for, CRM retargeting? Like, how does that even make sense? It's just that we don't show up in their system.
Yeah.
And I think for the whole audience, and they don't show up sometimes for app, systems and other systems. So just be careful that your reporting system doesn't alter or change your marketing strategy so much that you end up hurting yourself.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point, is you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And also 2021 and, third-party cookies, IFDA, all of that's moving away. It's going to push us to be a lot more creative about how we're looking at our campaign, our marketing channels, and how they're performing. And so, I'm consistently talking to the team about cross-signal marketing. And it's not just, okay, I'm in Google Ads platform, and here's what it shows me from conversions. We actually need to look at, when we did this, did something happen here, right? Or if we did this, did something way over here have a change during the time that we flighted this particular thing? And so, I love to say that we're building a data-driven marketing team. We are hiring, for those of you that are watching. Everybody on the marketing org is very performance-driven, data-driven. But the reason why is because we have to be creative. We have to be able to say, to your point, Jason, is, I can't just say, oh, the email LiveIntent doesn't work because I'm not seeing it from a MTA, the UTM, or anything else like that. You have to look at one of the other signals. Did you see an increase in actually direct conversions during that time frame? You flighted the LiveIntent that, oh, by the way, they sent them out to, I don't know, however many emails you guys can probably touch, millions, I imagine.
I think it's a 200 million per month.
So, I think if I'm a brand that's partnering with you guys, I would have to make sure that we are measuring things holistically and not narrow.
That's great. I think we covered off a lot of these questions. One I hear was can you give us an idea of how you shifted, or if you did, your media channels, plan over the last 2 months? So I think you may have answered that, but any other thoughts on the shifting of the media landscape, or how you're shifting your planning?
Yeah, I think TikTok. I wish I gave you another chance sooner. So we piloted TikTok. It didn't work for us. We piloted again. It didn't work for us. We actually, here's how scrappy and nimble we are. I want to give a shout out to one of my growth marketers. Her name is Daria. And she said, I'm going to give TikTok another life. And she went out, Jason, and created her own TikTok top ads, I guess what we call them. And lo and behold, TikTok is firing for us again. So, to that question when something doesn't work for you, continue to push it and continue to try. And that's a great conversation my CEO and I have all the time. Is she's like, great, if option A doesn't work, what's your option B, C, D, E, and F? And that's the type of culture that we want to create. Is if it doesn't work the first time, don't give up. It just means it wasn't the right time and it wasn't the right creative.
We've got a saying at LiveIntent, sometimes you have to say no to say yes, or to get to a good yes. And if we sniff out that someone isn't willing to work hard at figuring out how to make, this email channel, which is the size of Facebook in North America, it might take a little bit of time to work out. Sometimes it can work in 7 to 10 days getting through learning mode. But if we sense that someone doesn't have the tolerance, that they might cancel in 2 or 3 days if they're not seeing what they want, they're not willing to go through learning mode, which could take 10 to 15 days, we won't run it.
Yeah.
Because if they cancel after 3 or 4 days, we don't have a valid sample size. It's not indicative of real performance, and so we'll actually sometimes say no. They're like, "What do you mean no? Like, unless you're willing to really work at least for 4 to 8 weeks to figure out what works, then it's not worth it." And if you think about how people approach Facebook, if it didn't work in the first 5 days, you'd still be doing it. You'd still give it a try because
Yeah.
they've got 220 million people or so that they're reaching. So at least in North America. So I love that you have this dedication to testing, failing, and then get up and do it again.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean,
Fail fast, fix it, move on.
that's exactly right. What do they say? Fail fast and fail cheap. And even if you don't fail cheap, fail fast so you can learn and we can iterate and continue to grow. And Carrie, our CEO, continues to push us to do that all the time. And she's like, I'm okay if you fail, but let's make sure we're pulling out the learnings. And I love that. And that's what we continue to do.
That's what SpaceX just did. And they finally landed that rocket, I think, yesterday for the first time. And they're like, we're going to have a bunch of rockets blow up.
Yep.
But we're not going to wait until we try and get it perfect. We're just going to keep on launching these things and we're going to fix things along the way. So yeah, don't be afraid. I think a fun question, because we got, just a few more minutes, is the most important thing is, what did you do during COVID to stay, sane?
Yeah. What did I do? I would say I'm in the camp of I refined my cooking skills. So, I think a lot of us out there figured out how to cook different things. I think I didn't do the bread thing though. I had a lot of friends. I don't know about you. I saw a lot of bread on Instagram during the first 4 or 5 months of the pandemic. I ran a lot because I'm a runner, so I love getting out there, and the roads were empty, which is great. I was okay. So Bridgerton, for sure. I watched Bridgerton. And for the first time ever, which I don't know why it took me so long, my husband and I were on the RuPaul's Drag Race train. So we watched that last season and then most recently this season. But that's what I think kept me sane, because I was listening to the team before us, and the pandemic, it just feels like one long day, and home is just, it's one long day. Your 8 hours turns into 15 hours very easily. Your 5 days turns into 7 days very easily. So you got to find those outlets to keep you sane.
Yeah, definitely during the dead of winter, the weekends felt like the weekdays, because I'd still have more work to do, and I'd still end up, doing that stuff. And I also find myself looking at screens far too often. So, what I'm trying to do, what I've done, is actually, just as often as I can, don't be looking at a screen. So when I have downtime, stop looking at my screen or watching TV or playing games or whatever it is, or shopping. Like, it felt like there was times where I was on a computer or a screen for like 18 hours a day, end up watching TV, some guilty pleasure, till like 3 o'clock in the morning. My wife was watching these Korean dramas, which now we're both sucked in, which it's not good to be up that late, watching that stuff. But hiking and biking and actually just being physical in the world is something that I'm going to carry over and continue in my post-pandemic, life.
Yeah, perfect.
Which is really big. We got 4 minutes, 4 minutes left. Let me see if any other questions came out. Over the last year, we've seen incredible innovation across all industries. Tell us about a new innovation in ways that your brand is connecting with consumers today.
Yeah, I would say, how are we innovating and connecting with consumers every day, or today rather? We are just pushing on trying to be scrappy. And so, I think where I come from with bigger brands, with larger teams and, data science teams, consumer research teams, insights, we are pushing to be as scrappy as possible, to make sure that we're being as innovative as possible. And so,
what you're doing on TikTok is actually, that is innovative, like a whole different approach to actually talking to people and being willing to try over, again, I think is actually a really good example of that. Are you using influencers at all? Is that something that
yeah, so
we
started using influencers as well. And I think one thing that I find unique about us that I haven't seen in other businesses is we actually don't engage with an agency. we actually have a team member who is cross-channel, so they work on multiple channels, and one of them is influencer marketing. And so, she is out there sliding into DMs and messaging people and saying, hey, we love what you do. We'd love to partner with you. She's working through the content. She's working through the creative. So we really own all of that in-house. I think that the thing that I push the team on is making sure that we're covering as widely as possible of an influencer, because what we want to do in 2021 and beyond is we want to be where our patients need us to be when they aren't expecting us. And so, I think it's great. Yes, we have all of our paid search, trademarks, broad match, online birth control in your home. We have all that covered. But what we actually want to do is we want to build a relationship with our patients in their most authentic areas, in their most authentic ways. And so we are out there, finding influencers that aren't necessarily in healthcare space, aren't necessarily in trends or industries that are focused and geared towards one particular audience. But we really just try to go broad, because, you never know. Somebody might catch you in the most odd moment, and then you're like, wow, that was really impactful. I think I'm going to look those guys up.
Lauren, do we have one more time for one more question? Are we good?
Absolutely, go for another.
So, one thing we didn't get to is, think about your audience, and it is really diverse. And I think one of the biggest differences is that 25-year-old or 18-year-old versus the, 40-year-old, and they're very different audiences. So, how are those ages, approaching you, and what's their bias, or what's, what is the big difference between the younger segment and the older segment?
Great question. I would say through the research that we've done and through the research we've seen, there's different use cases. So, I think part of me joining this brand is it was a huge educational and learning curve for me, right? And so birth control just is not for people who are sexually active. There are so many uses out there beyond that. Yep. There are, to help with skincare and acne treatment, to manage periods, to manage cramps, bloating, and other things, right? Endometriosis we could go into. And so I think what we've done is we look at some cohorts or some groups of prospective patients, and we message to them what we found statistically to be the most impactful for them and resonate most for them. It doesn't mean that we don't cover the other parts or uses of birth control with that audience, but what we really try to do is make sure that the content is relevant, the copy that we're sending them is as relevant as possible. And the other thing is we are meeting as an internal team weekly, daily, about what are the next products that are coming out of SimpleHealth to make sure that we can cover our patients on their full reproductive journey. So from their first period all the way to their, menopause cycle and everything in between. So we've got a lot of fun things coming down the pipeline for SimpleHealth in the future. And I'm really excited about building a brand that is authentic and uses great partners, like LiveIntent, even though we don't use you now, but doesn't mean we're not going to use you soon.
Well, no, Monica was great. I mean, I think that we met with her the day after we talked, and I think there's actually already an IO. So thank you for that.
I love it.
It was within 24 hours.
We need to test, and we need to learn, and we need to be there for our patients. So
thanks to Brand Innovators for making that possible.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, that's it for us. Lauren, thank you. By the time I see you next time, my hair will be as long as yours, I think.
Yeah. I can't wait. Yeah. I have to tell you, Rico, whenever I think about Jason, and this is amazing, I think of a yacht, because he is the man. He's on every yacht. He knows everybody. So yeah, he would always take care of his friends at Brand Innovators and get them into everything.
I love it. What's funny is, Jason, if you look a year ago to, I don't know, the week or the month or whatever, I was actually doing a BI livecast, and you and I were in the same, it was like the same series of livecasts. You weren't my host. It was a different colleague, but I don't know what, like Facebook said, oh, a year ago you were doing this. And I was like, oh, it's the same picture.
Yeah. Oh, that's too funny. I forgot about that.
Yeah. Well, I love being a part of these. Thanks so much, Lauren, and thanks for the chat.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Rico, lastly, thank you for your service as well.
Absolutely.
Hey, it was an honor. It was absolutely an honor. So thank you.
Yeah. All right, guys. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank
Have a
you.
good rest of your day.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.